Hey, welcome to Flynndogg Woodwork. Today we're taking a look at a tool brand I guarantee you haven't heard of. This is a brand that makes precision tools at rock bottom prices. And I've got some help taking a look at these tools today. So let's dig into it and take a look at these items. So as I said in the intro, I've got a couple of visitors today, and judging from the comments, I know a lot of you really don't like one of them. And yes, unfortunately, my cousin Bert is still here, but a lot of you have been complaining that he's just not serious enough to give informed opinions about the tools we take a look at.
There's only one thing that's serious on this channel, and that's that it seriously sucks.
I'm beginning to understand why people don't like you.
Well, if I'm not good enough, why don't you introduce them to your other helper?
You know what? I'm gonna do that, but first I want to talk about the brand we're looking at. And the brand we're taking a look at today is called GoHelper. This is a brand that makes precision woodworking tools, and they compete with many of the popular brands like DFM, Woodpeckers, and even igaging.
How many times do I have to tell you it's eye-gagging?
So in order to please the masses, I invited another cousin of mine from Tennessee, Rachel, and he's here to help us because he's about as serious as it gets. He's a businessman from Tennessee and unfortunately is probably one of my smartest cousins. Let's go say hi. Hey, Rachel.
I done told you it's Raquel now, and I'm trying to study for this CPA exam. Can we turn on some Skinner?
No, we can't. Can you hand me that first tool?
This little thing? Oh, should I be wearing a dust mask? It kind of stinks in here.
I think you'll be okay. Yeah, that's the one.
Well, I'm gonna put one on anyway. Here you go.
So this is the GoHelper 3.5-inch small square. Let's unbox it and take a look. So before we dig into the GoHelper, we first need to talk about its competitors and the pricing. The Woodpeckers comes in at $130. The DFM is about $42, and the igaging is at $29, while this square is under $25.
Hold on one red-blooded minute. You say $130 for that Woodpeckers? That's crazier than the shithouse rat.
I know, right? But none of this really matters unless the square can perform. So let's unbox it and take a look. So first off, let's take a look at the packaging. As you can see, everything is nice and secure in a nice foam pad. Now, as you may have noticed, the tool does come with a mechanical pencil, which is a 0.7 millimeter, along with some extra lead. If we look at the tool itself, you can see it's got white laser etched markings on both sides. It also comes with a pin to help you set some predetermined angles. Now, my first impression with this tool is it looks like almost an exact replica of the DFM square. So let's compare the two. And my suspicions were correct. If we take a look at the two squares together, you can see they have the exact same holes for 67.5, 60, 45, 30 degrees, as well as 22.5. You'll also notice that they have scribe holes at every 1/16 of an inch on both squares. You'll also notice they have a very similar side profile, with the DFM being just a little bit thicker. If we look at the base, however, they have the exact same thickness at 3/4 of an inch. Now, if we do a bird's eye view of the two squares, you can see why the GoHelper has a thinner triangle, and that's because it has a 1/4 inch lip as well as a 3/8 inch lip, while the DFM only has a 1/4 inch on both sides. Lastly, when both squares are set on side, you can see that they both have a 3/4 inch base. Next, let's compare the heights of all four of the small squares that I have. As you can see, the GoHelper and the DFM have the exact same height. Now, the Woodpeckers is just a little bit taller because it has a 1/2 inch step on the very bottom. Lastly, the igaging is a 1/2 inch taller because it's a 4-inch square. Now let's move on and do one of the most important tests and see if this GoHelper is actually square. Now, in order to test for square, I would use the pencil that came with the tool, but it doesn't appear to work. But let's use a different mechanical pencil, strike a line, flip the tool over, and test for square. And that looks perfectly square. Now let's scribe a line at every 1/16 of an inch and see what that looks like. And I'll have to say, that was one of the smoothest scribing experiences I've ever had. My lead in my pencil didn't break once for all 45 of those lines, but let's compare it to the Woodpeckers. Here you can see how consistent each one of those lines were, and if we push the two squares together, you can see they perfectly match up. And just as a side note here, only the DFM and the GoHelper have scribe holes at every 1/16 of an inch. The Woodpeckers and the igaging are only at every 1/8 of an inch. Now let's take a look at how we use the pin to scribe out predetermined angles. So to use the pin, you simply place it into one of the holes for the predetermined angles. And in this case, we have 67.5, 60 degrees, 45 degrees, 30 degrees, and 22.5. So I'm going to place it into the 60-degree hole and we'll strike a line. Then we rest the pin right up against the edge of the board, strike our line, and the angle right here should be 60 degrees. So I'm pretty impressed with this GoHelper square. I don't think you can find any other square at this price point with all the functionality of the DFM square while still being just as accurate as the Woodpecker's Delve square. Now believe it or not, there was one other hole in this tool and I wasn't quite sure what that hole was for other than to hang the tool, but apparently there is a function. And believe it or not, yes, that is a peephole.
I wish every tool had a peephole.
I'm sure you do. Well, other than having a bum pencil, I think this GoHelper small square is really worth taking a look at, especially at that price point. But as I said earlier, we've got 3 GoHelper tools to check out today. And this next tool may also remind you of a DFM tool, but it's quite a bit bigger.
Yeehaw! Is this where you need your GoHelper helper again?
I guess that's what I need, yeah.
Coop, that's what I thought. Here you go. You really think they're gonna like Raquel better than me? Something's not right with that boy.
I'm not sure they're gonna like either one of you. So this is once again the GoHelper small square. So although both these tools are called the exact same thing, they're quite a bit different. Let's dig into it. Before I dig into this box, I first want to talk about some of the competitors. One of the first small squares that I purchased is this small red one, and this one costs about $10. The next one that I got is this DFM square, and this costs about $24. The one that's not pictured is this Woodpecker's one, and that's because I'm not insane. This costs approximately $36, and this one made by GoHelper only costs $11.99. Now that was a wide range of prices, but I think we need to look at the physical structure of this GoHelper tool to see why I think it's such a great deal. And the difference is immediately evident. If we look at the GoHelper square, you can see that it's 4 inches tall by 2.5 inches wide, while the other 2 squares are only 2.5 inches tall and 1.5 inches wide. Now once again, if I had to compare apples to apples, I would compare the GoHelper square to the small DFM square. And that's for obvious reasons. Both of these tools come with 2 pins to allow you to use this as a center finder. You'll also notice both tools have a little hole to allow you to place your pencil inside. But the GoHelper, with its wider stature, allows you to find the center on pieces of material as wide as 3 inches. But the DFM only allows you to find the center on material as thick as 1 3/4 inch. And this can make a big difference, especially if you're working with any stock over 1 3/4 inch. For example, on this 2.5 inch piece of wood, the DFM just can't straddle that wood. However, the GoHelper easily straddles it, and with both pins on either side, you can place your pencil to find the direct center. But obviously, since both of these tools are squares, you can also use them for that function. But in order to do that, we first need to make sure that GoHelper is square. So one way we can test this is to place both of the pins in the bottom of the square. This will create a small lip so that the square can rest right up against the wood. We'll strike a line in one direction. Then we can remove the 2 pins, flip the square over, and replace both of the pins. Then we can set it up right against our first line and strike a second line. And that looks perfectly square. So now that we know that the GoHelper square is actually square, let's take a look at some of its other features that the other small squares just don't have. If we look at the side profile of the square, you can see there's measurements going from 0 all the way up to 4 inches on one side and 0 all the way up to 2.5 inches on the other. Now unfortunately, these markings are only in 1/8 inch increments, but this is a feature that I haven't seen in any of these other small squares. And it's these markings that not only allow you to use this tool as a square for things like your table saw blade, but also as a depth gauge. Now one thing that I do like about the DFM square is that it's small enough to fit underneath the teeth, but this can be solved by simply taking the GoHelper and rotating it on one side. And there really is a benefit to having one longer side. For things like your drill press, you can easily find out whether or not your drill press is perfectly square. It's also an excellent tool to check out the squareness of things like your bandsaw, or even a quick reference for your jointer fence. And I really do like the size of this GoHelper square versus the DFM square. With its extra length, it gives it a lot more features, not to mention the fact that it's got a scale on the side to use as a depth gauge. Well, so far, I'm nothing but pleased in taking a dive into this GoHelper brand, but we do have one more tool to take a look at, and this is one that I'm super excited about. But before we dig into our last tool, I'm going to ask you to do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and leave a comment. It really does help out this small woodworking channel. Also, just like with all my videos, I'll leave links in the description below, so if any of these tools interest you, you can go check them out in the links below. Also, I'm continuing to work on my new website, www.flynndogwoodwork.com. There you can find some fun woodworking accessories like the t-shirts that I wear in my video, as well as some shop updates and tool recommendations. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, check out my website, and thanks again for allowing me to have this channel. Now let's check out our third and final item. So if you've been watching this channel for any period of time, you know that I have a fascination with lips on tools. Specifically, lips for squares, but a lot of squares like framing squares just don't have lips. But this last GoHelper tool may help solve all that. Hey Rachel, can you hand me that next tool?
I done told you it's Raquel now, and all this talk about lips remind me I've got lip injections at 5. We almost done.
Can you just hand me the next tool?
You know, you look pretty good with some lipstick. It does wonders for my pigs. Here you go. Boy, ain't right.
So this next GoHelper tool is also called a small square. Wait, no, it's a removable framing square fence. In my opinion, this really is a tool innovation. I've only seen one other tool brand attempt to make a tool like this, and that's Tay Tools. So before we take a look at this tool, let's grab some framing squares and I'll show you what problem this tool solves. So we've all ran into this problem before. We're trying to square up a larger piece of wood and we're using a framing square. Now usually we'll try to line up the edge of the square to the end of the workpiece, or we'll take it off the edge of the workpiece and line it up with the top of the square. But the problem is when you line up the top of the square, it usually falls right off the workpiece. And either one of those methods isn't going to give you a very accurate square measurement. But GoHelper may have just solved this problem. Let's go check this tool out. This is the GoHelper removable framing square fence. Let's take a look at this and see how it works. If we take a look at the side profile of the tool, you can see there's a little slot here, and this is what you slide your framing square into. This is 1/4 of an inch thick, so this can accommodate any framing square under 1/4 of an inch. To use this tool, you simply take your framing square and you slide it into the slot. Once your framing square is inside, you make sure that the edge of the framing square is completely flush with the tool. Once you have the square in position, you simply turn the 2 knobs in the front to lock the square into place. Once you have this square in place, you can see how it gives this ordinary framing square 2 lips to reference your material. One that's 0.3 inches and the other that's 3/4 of an inch. You'll also notice there's a scale ruler that's 8 inches long on the bottom of the fence. This can be helpful if you're carrying your measurements across your material. Once you have your tool in place, you can rest your framing square right on top of your material and it's fully supported. And this GoHelper tool is really quite flexible. Not only can you use it with larger framing squares, but with just a couple of turns of both knobs, you can switch it out to smaller framing squares like this one that's 8 inches wide. Now I would test for square, but this tool will only be as accurate as the accuracy of the framing square that you put in it. But it will, however, finally give you a chance to test the accuracy of that framing square that you've been putting your trust in for years. Most importantly, this tool is a great way to convert a cheap framing square into a precision marking tool. Well, that's it, folks. I'm actually really blown away by the quality of each one of these GoHelper tools, especially at this price point. I think this is definitely a brand worth taking a look at. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and leave a comment. It really does help out this small woodworking channel. Also, check out my new website, www.flynndogwoodwork.com. Until next time, take care as always.
Don't let him replace me with Raquel.